Donald Trump's explanation for stopping military exercises with South Korea, namely, saying they were too expensive, was ridiculous, a senior Republican has claimed. Mr. Trump stunned many observers at the Singapore summit when he declared he wanted to end very provocative war games with South Korean forces. He said the US paid for the majority of them, and they were very expensive. We fly in bombers from Guam, he said. The announcement came as a surprise to most, including the government and military of South Korea and the 28,500 US troops stationed in the country. On Wednesday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo flew to Seoul to explain Mr. Trump's plan, seen as a major concession to North Korea and Kim Jong-un, to the foreign ministers of South Korea and Japan. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina said he supported Mr. Trump's decision, but for a different reason. He said it was important to give North Korea some breathing space to see if we can get a deal. He said Mr. Trump's complaint about the cost was ridiculous, adding to CNN, "The money we spend training with our allies is money well spent. It's not a burden onto the American taxpayer to have a forward-deployed force in South Korea. It brings stability.It a warning to China that you can't just take over the whole region," said Mr. Graham, a member of the Senate Armed Forces Committee. "So I reject that analysis, that it costs too much, but I do accept the proposition. Let's stand down and see if we can find a better way here." Mr. Trump told reporters in Singapore he wanted to halt the exercises, which includes Ulchi Freedom Guardian, one of the largest military exercises in the world. The war games spread over 11 days and involve thousands of US and South Korean troops, an event North Korea has long described as being a deliberate provocation. "Under the circumstances that we're negotiating a very comprehensive, complete deal, I think it's inappropriate to have war games. It is something that North Korea very much appreciated," he said. He then cited the cost of the exercises. "We fly in bombers from Guam. Singapore summit, historic first meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un. 20 show all Singapore summit, historic first meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un. 1/20th Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim leave following their historic meeting. AFP Getty 2/20ths Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim sign a document committing to peace between their nations, amongst other things. EPA 3/20ths Mr. Trump holds up a document that both he and Mr. Kim have signed. AFP Getty 4/20ths the two leaders reach out to shake hands for the first time. AP 5/20ths Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim shake hands as they meet for the first time. Reuters 6/20ths Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim walk off stage following their historic meeting. Reuters 7/20ths Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim take a stroll after their meeting on June 12. Reuters 8/20ths Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim interrupt their stroll to talk to the media. AP 9/20ths Mr. Kim and Mr. Trump look out over a balcony at the Capella Hotel, where they held their meeting on June 12. Reuters 10/20ths Mr. Trump takes questions at the press conference following his meeting with Mr. Kim. AP 11/20ths Mr. Trump appreciates the crowd in the press conference following his meeting with Mr. Kim. Getty 12/20ths Mr. Trump travels to the Astana ahead of the summit with Kim Jong-un on June 12. Reuters 13/20ths Kim Jong-un travels to the Astana ahead of the summit with President Trump on June 12. Reuters 14/20ths Mr. Kim poses for a photo with Singapore's Finance Minister Vivian Balakrishnan and Education Minister Ong Ye Kung ahead of the summit with Mr. Trump. Twitter Reuters 15/20ths Mr. Trump shakes hands with Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, meeting on Monday, June 11 in the Astana, Singapore's presidential palace. AP 16/20ths at a working lunch on Monday, Singapore's Prime Minister surprised Mr. Trump with a birthday cake in early celebration of his 72nd birthday. Later in the week, EPA 17/20ths US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo answers questions about the summit at a press briefing in Singapore on Monday, June 11. Getty 18/20ths US President Donald Trump arrives at the Paya Lebar Air Base in Singapore on June 10 2 days prior to his summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Reuters 1920's Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim met on Tuesday, June 12 in the Capella Hotel on the island resort of Sentosa, just off the south coast of Singapore. AFP Getty 2020's Mr. Trump boards Air Force One following the summit. AFP Getty. That's a long time for these big massive planes to be flying to South Korea to practice and then drop bombs all over the place and then go back to Guam, he added. I know a lot about airplanes. It's very expensive. Meanwhile, other Republicans voiced concerns that Mr. Trump had appeared too gushing when he spoke about Mr. Kim. Mr. Trump continued to praise him on Twitter on Wednesday as he flew back to Washington via Hawaii. Reuters quoted Republican Senator John Kennedy as saying Mr. Trump had to be vigilant as the process moved forward. It's important that we don't lose sight of the fact that Kim Jong-un is a butcher, and he's a butcher of his own people, he said. Trying to reason with someone like that is like trying to hand feed a shark.It doesn't mean that you can't do it, but you've got to do it very, very carefully. Senator Marco Rubio, who campaigned unsuccessfully against Mr. Trump in the 2016 Republican presidential primaries, also faulted Mr. Trump's praising of Mr. Kim. Kim is not a talented guy. He inherited the family business from his dad and grandfather. He is a total weirdo who would not be elected assistant dog catcher in any democracy, he said on Twitter. House Speaker Paul Ryan said in a statement, "We must always be clear that we are dealing with a brutal regime with a long history of deceit. Only time will tell if North Korea is serious this time, and in the meantime we must continue to apply maximum economic pressure." Meanwhile, Democrats were much more scathing. It's clear that Kim Jong-un walked away from Singapore with exactly what he wanted: the pomp, circumstance and prestige of a meeting with the President of the United States, while making no specific commitments in return, said Mark Warner, the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Whether this will result in a verifiable agreement to dismantle North Korea's nuclear weapons program, America and the world will wait to find out.